Hi everyone, welcome back. If you don't know me, my name is Catherine, and if you do know me, you'll know that sometimes we do autopsy, sometimes we do rants, sometimes we do reviews. This will probably be a little bit of both because I just watched the last season of Bridgerton and I am not happy, and I have a lot of things that I want to say. I have a lot of things that I want to discuss. If you've watched it, we'd love to know your thoughts, we'd love to know your opinions. Otherwise, without further ado, let's begin.
You will need to seek approval of the father of an eligible young lady, which requires you to be a gentleman and not a rake.
So I personally believe that one of the more reliable barometers of a story's transition from, say, fictional artifact to modern classic is not its moral clarity or even its originality. It's actually its afterlife. What I'm essentially referring to is the frequency and just the intensity with which that story is examined after its final conclusion. We know and we appreciate that truly enduring stories do not remain static. They are returned to again and again across media, across generations, across ideological climates. They are revised, sanitized, politicized, romanticized, inverted, stripped for parts, and then eventually reassembled within new cultural bodies. What I'm saying is they eventually, inevitably, find themselves within new creative bodies until the original bones show through the skin. And these stories survive not necessarily because the original version was immaculate or perfect, but because the first narrative skeleton was so incredibly load-bearing. This, I believe, is what it truly means for a story, to become incarnate. And it is precisely what Northrop Frye meant when he said that a myth, a folklore, does not completely rid itself in modernity. It simply goes underground and resurfaces in genres that, insist that they have outgrown it, outmatured it, effectively gone beyond its traditional bounds through things like ideology, things like, human advancement, a generation in the wake of a revolution, awakening to a new standard of being, of relating to one another, and to be clear, that has, and for better or for worse, translated to a diminished and diluted standard in the types of stories we allow to proliferate. Lord of the Rings, Hamlet, Genesis, Faust, and even controversially, works like 50 Shades of Grey and other classics. What was that other one? There we go. Twilight. These stories, they end up persisting in modernity not because they are uniformly excellent, but because I think it's so clear that they rehearse the same anthropological drama against the anxieties of a new age. And so we see that each retelling is less, a retelling and more so a diagnosis. Here is what this generation fears, desires, misunderstands, or hopes to save it. And again, we appreciate that culture does not endlessly cycle a story, again and again and again until we're tired of it, unless that story is doing psychological labor on its behalf. Then there's Cinderella, arguably I think the most resilient narrative organism in Western imagination. And not because Cinderella as a classic overtly promises rescue, but because it formalizes longing under restraint. And you guys, there is a reason I wanted to start off this discussion talking about Cinderella, because it is the story against which, the books by Julia Quinn, and consequently Bridgerton season 4 is developed against. It is a story that we cannot deny has survived millennia, not because it flatters the audience, but because its narrative bones, like I said in the beginning, are brutally efficient. It is brilliant, in my opinion, because it structures sufferance and pursuit into moral trajectory. It takes the ache that we are all familiar with, an ache that I am definitely very familiar with, of unmet yearning, whether it be economic or romantic or existential, and it renders this ache narratively tolerable and therefore a drama worth seeing through to its end. Cinderella does not deny the reality of deprivation, of pain, of never having enough, like I said, that longing to just have some respite from what you are going through. Instead, it anchors the viewer in relatability by making that experience familiar within a character that endures it well, right? Within a character who's almost insultingly perfect in enduring the suffering in a way that looks virtuous, looks like something to aspire to. Essentially, it ritualizes it. See, waiting becomes meaningful and obscurity becomes provisional. Endurance becomes palatably visible, even when unrewarded yet. And so, Cinderella becomes, in not just, our modern cultural age, but historically, a story that you can never go wrong with. You can never go wrong with wanting to commercialize, because it is just, it is evergreen. You can always make money off a retelling of Cinderella. And while, yes, it mostly appeals to the female gaze, its original bones, I believe, pull on bilateral desires between the sexes. And I'll explain why I have that conviction. So what I've noticed is that for men, particularly the more romantic types who appreciate Cinderella for what it is, and trust and believe there are not many of them, and there are fewer of them willing to talk to me or to anyone really about whether there is any argument to be made about liking Cinderella that doesn't, translate to them as somehow being gay. There are gents who are like hardcore romantics, but there's a reason. There is a definite reason that shows like Bridgerton will not appeal to them, because they view the end point of a romance differently. And that, in my personal opinion, and again, I could be completely off. So if you're a guy watching this, please tell me if I'm wrong. I'm willing to be corrected. But I don't think I'm off with this. I don't think I'm off. I think that this essentially translates to a conviction that Cinderella encodes a specific and increasingly endangered hope. Let me explain it. Let me paint a picture for you. I believe, again, just my personal opinion, I believe that Cinderella represents an ideal that culture ultimately mocks and monetizes. That there exists somewhere in the world, right, a woman who is kind without being porous, who is, patient beyond what her circumstances justify.
Do they treat you well?
Oh, better than I deserve, most likely. And you?
They treat me as well as they are able.
I'm sorry.
It's not your doing.
She navigates that tension delicately, excellently, I might even say. And she wants to be pursued, but not desperately, not dramatically, not in a way such that it gratifies your own self-possession. Obscurity has not made her theatrical for, the first gesture of attention. Her restraint is not necessarily because she is disinterested, but because she is discerning. She's also trying to walk this line carefully and, respect herself and respect you. Crucially, access to her is never fully earned, because she is not acquired through brute effort alone. Encounters occur through contingency, chance, interruption. Each meeting literally feels like a coincidence that you could not force or provide. It's only something you could hope for, and yes, it feels like fate. Or maybe the correct word is that it feels like grace. She is difficult to reach, yes, but she is unmistakably willing to be found. She is not strategically elusive in order to manipulate, but she is scarce, and that scarcity almost works strangely in her favor, because scarcity in this world represents a challenge. And yet the man senses almost painfully that she wants to be found, not captured, not consumed, but found. And there's a difference. The fantasy, as you can probably tell, is redemptive, and it represents a peculiar, but I think, even though, not really romantic, but I do think it represents a beautiful moral horizon, that his pursuit would heal something in her world, and her response in mutual affection would heal something in him as well. Again, not to kill your dreams or anything, but guys, there's a reason this is a fantasy. It can be, if it's done well, it can be really cute to see.
Will you take me as I am? An honest country girl who loves you.
Of course I will. But only if you will take me as I am. An apprentice still learning his trade. Please.
You're not like the other young ladies, They are...
Constantly pursuing you.
It can be really, it's... Even for those of us who are with the whole romance stuff, it's yes. Okay, there's what I'm saying is there's a reason it's a fantasy. There's a reason it's an ideal that people are able to sell and monetize so effectively. Point is, it is a fantasy. I wouldn't go as far as to say that it's a delusion, but you know, if you're in the right headspace, it can definitely be a beautiful thing. So moving on from there. With women though, I do think that Cinderella offers a far more dangerous promise. It proposes that endurance itself is a moral technology, that suffering, if borne with sufficient grace, patience, invisibility, will eventually compel recompense. That there exists such a thing as immaculate suffering, a way to bear, the worst of this world so well that the universe is actually morally compelled to compensate you. Social psychologists would identify this as a variant of a just world bias. And I wish I could say that theologians would rightly, see this as a misinterpretation of, well, the way the world is, but that is not the case. The unfortunate truth of the matter is that many people have been honestly damaged into the idea that their imperfect posture towards suffering, towards neglect, towards abuse makes morally legitimate its infliction upon the victim. And that is wrong. Because see, when redemption fails to arrive, whether through a prince or a profession or personal transcendence, the logic inverts. The failure is brutally internalized. You did not endure correctly. You did not suffer beautifully enough. You were not patient enough. You were not good enough. You were not effectively Cinderella enough. And here, the bilateral fantasy collapses inward on itself. And for men, several possible inverse assumptions may arise. For example, such a woman does not likely exist, and if she does exist, he can't be worthy of her. He cannot give her what she needs. She may not be able to understand what he needs, or worse, the modern woman trained in self-actualization may no longer know how to give a man what sustains him without experiencing it as her own erasure. Everyone gets lost in each other's identities, and it just becomes like this exhausting, toxic mess. For the woman, the inverse is crueler still. If relief never comes, it's not that the world has failed you, it's you. You are the problem. You have not endured well enough. And so when we look at the last season of Bridgerton, I think that the show does not interrogate the structure to the extent that it should. Instead, it aestheticizes it. And I know that the show is all about aesthetics. It's all about, enticing the viewer because things look so good. But I think it aestheticizes it at a great cost. What I observed watching this season is that the pain of impermanence is everywhere acknowledged, but it is nowhere allowed to discipline character. The show recognizes clearly that all things pass, but it refuses to acknowledge what passing demands of the soul. The conviction that slowly clarifies itself as Bridgerton progresses is less a thesis and more a pressure pattern. That the series is quietly circling a conspiracy of impermanence. And more specifically, pinnacles. I'm going to obviously be using that word as euphemism for other terms, but yes, pinnacles of all variations and types. I'm talking, yes, sexual pinnacles, but also relational pinnacles, social pinnacles, moments framed as arrival points, culminations effectively, without ever submitting them to the discipline of consequence, of responsibility.
You should be careful, Benedict. Madame Delacroix may not be who you think she is, and consorting with her, well, there may be consequences.
I would have expected this from anyone but you.
The show offers a gallery of peaks whilst refusing to depict, yes, a cruel consistency, but it is a consistency that makes the characters grow, that fosters development and character growth. And that's what we want to see. Well, at least that's what I want to see within a series. I want to see transformation. The reason arrival is not rest is because endurance is not to be interpreted as a transaction. Yes, we know, better is the beginning of a thing. Better is the end of a thing than the beginning thereof. And I know, yes, we're only like at the midpoint of the season, and so I'm obviously being very, I know, guys, I'm being a little bit overly critical. I'm being very nitpicky, but these are just my feelings so far. My point is, this season is intoxicated with beginnings, new permissions, new desires, new selves, new avenues of exploration. Every major arc circles a pinnacle, and then it cuts away. And you know, I just have to say, as a woman watching this series, fully aware that its narrative imagination is disciplined by female writers, female producers, mostly a female audience, I cannot help but ask an uncomfortable question.
I'm skilled at more than simply standing naked, Mr.
Bridgerton.
Why in a show so allegedly crafted for women, for female audiences, is the representation of the male love interest so consistently sabotaged at first contact? First impressions matter not because audiences are shallow or stupid, but because we are psychologically literate. We're not we do watch even shows meant just for, you know, for indulgence with a level of scrutiny. And with Bridgerton, I've noticed a pattern, a trend with all of the love interests, save maybe for Queen Charlotte, but with all of the, you know, all of the leading men, I'm talking Anthony, Colin, and Benedict, they all enter their respective seasons with a similar aperture. Sexual indiscrimination framed as charm, variety articulated as depth, and indulgence elaborated as evidence of their free, unmoored spirits, and also as definitively an attractive characteristic that, that clearly as us, the female audience, should be able to, you know, to cling to as as we immerse ourselves in the story. And I just want to be clear when I say this, okay? I am not disturbed by the realism of their behavior. I am more so disturbed by what their behavior categorically represents. We know empirically, and yes, I am quite logical when it comes to this, but necessarily so. We know that, you know, individuals habituated to constant novelty seeking and sexual variation tend to struggle with delayed gratification. They do have a hard time with impulse regulation and with relational attunement. Dopaminergic systems trained on variety do not, you know, spontaneously convert into systems optimized for patience, for attentiveness, for sacrifice, just because the right woman arrives. We know this. We've seen this, like, not just historically, but in literally, like, in modern, not just celebrity culture, but in our immediate lives. And this, I think, is where the narrative fails the female gaze. It is not true that a sufficiently virtuous or even beautiful woman disciplines a man's appetites on his behalf. I feel so strongly about this that I actually think that it is it is some form of sociological malpractice to sell a woman the idea that male self-mastery is activated externally, right, by as a function of her own virtue, of her own beauty, of her own deservingness of him, rather than something chosen internally within the man, like as a function of his own autonomy. The Bridgerton sons do not lack desire, they lack constraint. And like consistently throughout the seasons, it bleeds into how dependable they end up being in their other interpersonal relationships. Constraint, not indulgence, is what eroticizes maturity. That, in my opinion, is what is attractive. Benedict did not do it for me, guys. I think I spoke about the last season, I think, with Colin. Colin did not do it for me. If they did it for you, great, please enjoy. But for me, no. And that's the point is, the greatest irony of Bridgerton is that it believes it is serving women. It believes that it is indulging the female gaze by eroticizing male indulgence. Many women are not fantasizing about men who chase their own legacies, who chase their own pleasures without any permanence, without any mooring, without orientation, without responsibility. These inclinations to an undisciplined appetite, to me, are not romantic traits. They're not attractive. They are adolescent. What I think Queen Charlotte understood, and then this season intermittently remembers, and then, you know, conveniently forgets, is that desire becomes compelling when it is disciplined by cost, not multiplied by access. And that is precisely why Benedict, as a character, as a romantic ideal that, you know, as a viewer I'm supposed to cling to, he never persuaded me. The only character in this season who's somewhat I was somewhat kind of drawn to was actually John. So to reiterate, what Bridgerton circles this season in, like I said, almost every conceivable register, is this idea of impermanent pleasure, whether it be sexual, relational, social, aesthetic, and it offers the viewer a gallery of pinnacles to mistake arrival for certain resolution. And in doing so, it all but demands a counter-reading, one not grounded in romance, but in proportion. What I need you to appreciate is that the language of the pinnacle, right, the climax, sexual, romantic, emotional, social, functions today as something of a secular sacrament, because at the end of the day, it promises arrival, it promises completion, stabilization of worth, right? Proof of desirability. It offers in a strange way what religion sometimes claims to, but without the burden of transcendence. Basically, it's a moment that certifies the self.
I do not know what the pinnacle is, or means, or where to find it, or how to acquire it, or what is a pinnacle.
But the concept of hevel in Ecclesiastes, which I'm bringing up because I think it's just so brutal, I think it's so elegant, I think it is so accurate a diagnosis. Basically, it introduces a counter law that modern romance refuses to metabolize. Peak experiences, you guys, collapse the moment that they are grasped. Dopaminergic systems are calibrated for the endurance of that pursuit, right? Not necessarily the possession at the end of that trajectory. The spike is fleeting, the come down is structural, right? We were not, as human beings, designed to live at the summit. And that is precisely because the pinnacle is not a destination. It is elevation, then followed by descent. And it is where Francesca's arc becomes quietly devastating, because see, unlike Benedict, unlike her brother, Francesca pursues pleasure as resolution, whilst, her brother Benedict pursues it as a sort of access to variation.
It cannot always only be achieved through the action of love. It can help to be spontaneous, to create a sense of excitement or anticipation, like a bird staring at a warm biscuit. Forgive me, no more similes.
Francesca's desire, in opposition to Benedict's, is not how can I put this? It's not traditionally promiscuous in that sense. My point is, you will see Benedict engage in an orgy. You will not see Francesca in such a position. Francesca is searching not merely for love, but also not exactly for intimacy. She's searching for arrival. She is searching for that singular moment that longing resolves into completion. In narrative terms, this arrival is coded as, conception. And in psychological terms, this is coded as proof. And that is precisely why her shame is so acute. Francesca does not experience the absence of a sexual pinnacle as a mere disappointment. She actually experiences it as an indictment of her own character. The failure to climax is not registered as variance or timing or reasonable inconsistency, because these things you gotta, for lack of a better word, you have to practice. But my point is, for her, this is so severe that it hits as a metaphysical problem. Something has not merely gone unfinished, it has gone wrong. With her body, with her marriage, with herself. The desire, I don't think, is illegitimate, but there is a heavy and unhealthy, I think, expectation weighed against the impossible. The pinnacle is being conscripted to do the work of meaning, right? To stabilize that relationship's identity, to quiet existential unease, but a high cannot validate what is, a high cannot validate a relationship, a connection that is existentially valuable. It can only pass through it, pass along that connection, along that bond, along that cord in a way, as evidence that indeed the connection existed as a channel through which that experience could make itself known. And obviously to the pleasure of the participants. Francesca's shame also does not arrive from the absence of pleasure, because at least from what is evident, it's not like she's not enjoying herself. It arises from the belief that pleasure ought to arrive on schedule, at the proper intensity, and with the right transformative affect.
I should like everything to be just right before we invite anyone to our home.
Her dilemma is not who she loves, but what it means to reach a pinnacle and, feel nothing afterwards. This truly is an ecclesiastical terror, the reality that fulfillment does not consecrate suffering retroactively. And psychologically, this fully aligns with what hedonic adaptation research has been telling us for decades, that human beings recalibrate to pleasure faster than they can moralize pain. And modern romantic narratives, Bridgerton very much so amongst them, and I think why I struggle so much to just be able to enjoy them. Although obviously I do understand the value in transplanting the same narrative trajectory into every story, because obviously it sells people, you know, people like this type of stuff. My point is, the issue is that it trains the audience to interpret peak experiences as confirmations, right? That the love is real, that the dynamic is valid, that everything that you've endured together as a couple is worth the effort, is worth the pain, is worth the pleasure, is worth everything that was composed, you know, within it. Basically, it's a validation. And when peak experiences in your life, in your relationship, fail to appear, the conclusion is not that, okay, this moment has passed differently. The conclusion is that you, as an entity, and in disciplining your relationship, you failed. This is precisely why I think Francesca's posture stands in such stark contrast to John's.
I felt lovely.
John truly is such, like, seriously, he's such a green flag. He's such a green flag because he's not as insecure as Francesca, and he does not experience his wife's absence of a pinnacle as some indictment of his masculinity.
Yes?
You know, you do not have to do that.
Do what?
What unsettles him for the most part is not that Francesca's body is not responding to, you know, to certain expectation, but that she feels compelled to perform for his own sake. That his own wife must counterfeit pleasure in order to protect his identity, that he is the one who needs protecting in the first place. Thing is, he is clearly not insulted by her inability to reach a peak. He is insulted, as he should be, by the lie that she feels compelled to sell. Because John understands intuitively, almost instinctively, that pleasure is not an indictment or a metric. It is not a ledger balancing effort against endurance. It is not proof. It is not promise. Rather, it is a gift. And gifts in the ecclesiastical model are received without, you know, without entitlement, and they are relinquished without despair. John, like I said, is such a green flag because he doesn't ask that peak to stabilize the relationship, to certify his masculinity. He allows it to be what it is, a moment, good, fleeting, but unrepeatable. Because when pleasure is forced to bear the weight of identity, that collapse always internalizes as some sort of shame, some sort of indictment on what you could be doing but you are not. And that brings us inevitably to the deep ache at the heart of Cinderella, that something, that some peak, that some exhilaration is coming to save you from the process. A rescue that ends endurance rather than forms character. But again, like I said, the ecclesiastical model offers no such rescue, only this: endure without bargaining. Nothing is coming to save you from the season. Pivoting to the next representation of impermanence, I want to talk about Queen Charlotte for a second.
I sometimes think our queen must be the loneliest woman in England. Do you think she misses it? I beg your pardon? Companionship. The queen is at all times surrounded by her ladies, of course, but footmen, horsemen, guardsmen, yet no man, no gentleman.
So I actually have a different theory on Queen Charlotte's fixation on her current lady in waiting. I actually don't think it's a function of like friendship or sentimentality. I do think, and again this is just my theory, I think it's a form of terror management. Political psychologists have long observed that proximity attachments within late stage power structures buffer essentially against existential threat. Greenberg and Solomon's terror management theory argue basically that when mortality becomes unavoidable, individuals cling not to abstractions but to persons. Embodied continuities that promise emotional survival when symbolic immortality begins to fray. Queen Charlotte is surrounded by permanence. Well, say for her husband who was, you know, dying, but she's surrounded, yes, by crowns. She is surrounded by palaces, by protocol, by rituals, and yet, ironically, she craves something far more fragile. She craves a human presence that will not abandon her. She craves a friendship. She craves something that will reliably not dissolve. And the irony, you know, is like, it's brutal, it's sad, and it's also merciless because she rules an empire, but she cannot rule impermanence.
I would like for you and me to enjoy ourselves this season. In fact, on that, Your Majesty, I'm considering playing less of a part in society this year. It has been the honor of my life that you chose me. But it is time. I long to travel. I would like to leave at the end of this season. No.
She cannot force her lady-in-waiting, the only friend she's ever had her entire life, to stay with her. Her authority within this empire, within this regime, actually magnifies the problem rather than resolving it. Power does not insulate one from loss. It magnifies one's awareness of it, and you can see the effects on Charlotte, because it, indeed, is painful.
Every man and woman in the British Empire obeys the Queen's whim. We would go to battle to save her. But what matter? The one thing Her Majesty needs most cannot be conquered by any army.
And obviously incredibly overwhelming if you're forced to endure it alone, without a friend. Again, it's an incredibly painful irony. The more permanent the structure, the more apparent it is that nothing living around you is permanent, is dependable. So Charlotte's anxiety is not about companionship, it's about the transience of being negotiated away. Her desire is not erotic, it is actually eschatological.
I am sorry. Your Majesty, all is well.
You cannot leave me here all alone. What happens when he dies?
You need not worry. I am here.
She wants desperately a witness who stays with her, a friend who stays with her through everything. And that the sad part is that should have been the role of her husband, but her husband is fading away. And the tragedy is that no amount of sovereignty, no amount of power can secure that. No amount of power, no amount of influence can secure the permanence of the living. Sometimes people will fall ill and they slip away from you. Other times they just choose. They decide within themselves that they can't stay, that they have to leave. And if you truly love them, you have to let them go. All relationships at the end of the day are seasonal, and we see Queen Charlotte really struggling through that truth. Now, Lady Bridgerton's sexual awakening is framed, predictably as a form of liberation, but I think read more carefully, it actually reveals something a little bit more troubling. I think it reveals a moral tolerance fatigue. She is exasperated with Benedict's improprieties, yes, but again, this is just my interpretation. Her exasperation feels oddly performative. It feels gentle, it feels disengaged. Yes, I understand she's very maternal, but it feels almost like the offense lies less in the behavior than in the inconvenience of it continuing unresolved. She is clearly not as disturbed by his absence, when he is required to be at certain places, as much as she seems to be disturbed by its inefficiency. Will he eventually find a wife?
Does that mean I shall see you later on tonight? I hear there's a party.
I have much work to do, Mr. Bridgerton.
There are multiple moments, not just in this season, but I'm sure even in previous seasons, at the very least, definitely in the books, when Benedict is expected to be present, socially, morally, familiarly, and he is not. He is elsewhere. He is somewhere indulging, and his mother is irritated, but she's not implicated. I kept picking up on the pattern that Benedict's irresponsible behavior registers as background noise to the narrative rather than an ethical breach. And just as a mother, as if I had a man living in my house, a grown man living in my house, sleeping on my sheets, eating my food, consuming my resources, I'm sorry, I just would not be comfortable having strangers in my house every night and knowing that, orgies are taking place under my roof with a different group of people every night. I don't, maybe I'm too strict. Maybe, I don't know, please comment below. Would you be okay with that? I don't, would you be fine with your kid bringing home strangers every night, even into the morning, and just having endless orgies in your house, on your sheets? Am I crazy? I don't know, maybe, whatever. Point is, this shows to me not progressive neutrality, but adjudicative exhaustion. And I think it's a clear reflection of Lady Bridgerton's state of mind. It mirrors her own reckoning with desire, as she is now at a point where she's like, well, I have been disciplining my own longings for so long. Why can't I, now that my husband's dead, now that my children are grown up, why can't I have someone to, you know, play the field with, play around with? Her tolerance, in my opinion, of her children's indiscriminate behaviors, whether they be sexual, ethical, or, you know, social, obligatory, whatever, is not a reflection of generosity or, again, in my opinion, good parenting. It is the quiet suspension of judgment when one no longer believes that judgment matters. The household becomes a sanctuary for impulse, and yet the cost of that sanctuary is unevenly distributed. Someone must absorb the consequences, and when it comes to, especially, you know, the age that this series is set, it's almost never the men, okay? When a man has when a man has a mistress or like somebody who he's not married to but just, you know, fooling around with, it's the woman who gets spoiled. It's the woman who can't be employed afterwards. It's the woman who suffers socially, but the gentleman remains unscathed. Women, maids, wives, daughters are expected to endure quietly and transmute that chaos into grace. This is not liberation, you guys. This is a redistribution of burden. Again, going back to Plato's Symposium, which I referenced in my last video, it argues that love does not mature as just automatically. It argues the opposite, that love must be educated, and if desire is left, you know, to find itself by itself, it doesn't mature, it sprawls and it becomes this mess. Love does not redeem character. Well, I mean, it might, but first it exposes it. Habits, hard-worn habits that we have been engaged in for well, when in the case of Benedict, who knows how long. But my point is, they do not evaporate under affection. They actually metastasize through intimacy, which brings us inevitably back to Benedict and his, you know, his dynamics with Sophie, who, by the way, I just think is perfect. I think Sophie could do no wrong. But yeah, let's see how far are we with my notes. Almost there, almost done. Let's circle this around and conclude.
I stay away because you consume me. Be my mistress.
The request at the end of episode 4 that Sophie becomes Benedict's mistress is, I think, not a romantic misstep. It is the entire season's unconscious confession. This is where every indulgence, every tolerance, every unexamined appetite finally resolves into language, because Benedict reveals in this moment, without malice, without cruelty, without even much self-awareness, what precisely it is he believes that love is. Access. That's it. That is all. He does not offer Sophie a future. He offers her proximity, okay? He doesn't offer her any semblance of permanence. He only offers her availability. He offers her visibility in his eyes. He offers her essentially vaporous status. A place in his life that can be erased without consequence. And this is why I can't stand Benedict. Benedict does not understand love as responsibility. Benedict only ever understands love as accommodation. He assumes obnoxiously that desire, once declared, should be reasonable grounds for acceptance, especially so when it comes from him, right? When it comes from a gentleman, when it comes from a Bridgerton. But this is the final chilling implication of this season's obsession with impermanent pleasure. When desire is unmoored from responsibility, that pursuit, it actually becomes extractive. Sophie is by no stretch of the imagination being invited to a shared life. She is being asked to absorb risk so that Benedict can preserve his freedom. It is incredibly selfish. The social consequences are hers, right? The secrecy is hers. The disposability is hers. And this is why the proposal is so, like, remarkably offensive, because, and not because it's sexually improper, no, because it reveals exactly it exposes exactly the type of person that Benedict has already, it reveals us to be this entire season. Whoever loves pleasure will not be satisfied by it, and any woman who willingly accepts the position of vaporous value within a man's life does so not because she lacks worth, but because she's probably been taught that endurance itself will always, guaranteed, your endurance, your sufferance through somebody's through somebody's audacity to waste your time will be rewarded. And this is the final lie of the Cinderella myth. Not that rescue will come, but that being chosen retroactively justifies the cost of being used. And nothing in this season so far, because we're only at like the halfway mark, I think, but yeah, nothing in this season so far is more honest or more damning than the moment that Benedict asks Sophie to disappear for him. That moment I was so, as you can tell, I'm still quite, prickly about it. But yeah, that's all I have for you guys today. I think, yeah, it's all off my chest. We're good. We're fine. I promise. If this is your first time watching my videos, I'm not usually this angry. Yeah, we're good. We're good. I will see you hopefully very soon. If not, then it might be a while. But, I hope you enjoyed. If you decided to stay until the end, yeah, that's all I have for you guys today. I'll see you hopefully very soon. But you take care and goodbye.